Imagine an island so small that from the water, it almost looks like a pause between two worlds. Behind it stands the Statue of Liberty, holding a torch toward the sky. Ahead of it waits New York, loud, crowded, hungry, and alive. But for millions of people, this island was the first question America asked them. Who are you? Where did you come from? And should we let you in? This is Ellis Island, the gate where America decided who could enter. It was called the Island of Hope. It was also called the Island of Tears. Both names were true. For most immigrants, Ellis Island was a doorway into a new life. They arrived exhausted, frightened, carrying trunks, bundles, documents, children, photographs, prayers, and the last pieces of the lives they had left behind. But for others, the same building became a wall. A diagnosis, a legal question, a missing paper, or one official decision could separate a family from the future they had crossed an ocean to find. Before Ellis Island, immigration through New York was handled by the state, and Castle Garden at the Battery received millions of newcomers. But by the late 19th century, the scale had changed. Europe was shaken by poverty, political unrest, religious persecution, failed harvests, and dreams of work in America. Steamships carried people across the Atlantic, in numbers the old system could no longer manage. The United States was becoming a nation of factories, railroads, cities, and strangers. It needed a new gate. On January 1st, 1892, Ellis Island began receiving immigrants. The first person processed there was Annie Moore, a teenage girl from Ireland, traveling with her younger brothers to reunite with their parents. Her story became symbolic because she was both ordinary and historic. She was not a president, general, or millionaire. She was a young immigrant stepping into uncertainty. In that moment, Ellis Island announced what it would become, a place where private family hopes passed through the machinery of a nation. Then, only a few years later, fire changed the island. In 1897, the original wooden immigration station burned to the ground. Records and buildings vanished in smoke. No lives were lost, but memory itself was damaged. The government rebuilt Ellis Island with a new condition. The next structures had to be fireproof. In 1900, the great main building opened, stronger, larger, and more permanent. Its red brick limestone, arched windows, and vast registry room would soon become one of the most important interiors in American history. For immigrants in steerage, the journey began long before the island. They had crossed the ocean in crowded conditions, often near the bottom of the ship, with little comfort and no certainty. When the ship entered New York Harbor, many saw the Statue of Liberty before they saw Ellis Island. That sight could feel like a promise. But the promise was not the same as permission. First- and second-class passengers were often inspected aboard the ship. Steerage passengers were transferred by ferry or barge to Ellis Island for detailed inspection. They entered with luggage that told quiet stories, wooden trunks, wicker baskets, cloth bundles tied with rope, prayer books, family portraits, a change of clothes, a loaf of bread, a violin, a child's shoes. Sometimes an address written on paper was the only link between the immigrant and the new life waiting somewhere beyond the harbor. The baggage room was not only a place for objects, it was a place where old worlds were placed on the floor while people waited to discover whether they could carry them into America. Then came the stairs and the Great Hall, also known as the Registry Room. Thousands of people passed through that space under high ceilings and tall windows. The room looked almost grand, but the experience could feel frightening. Doctors watched people as they climbed the stairs, searching for signs of illness, weakness, disability, or exhaustion. Inspectors compared answers with ship manifests. Interpreters helped translate languages from across Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. In this hall, America became both a dream and a procedure. The inspection could be brief, but it did not feel small. For many, it lasted only a few hours. For others, every minute felt heavy. A chalk mark on clothing could send someone for medical examination. A legal concern could delay entry. A disease could mean exclusion. A suspicion that someone might become a public charge could become a barrier. The system was not simply asking whether people wanted America. It was asking whether America wanted them. That was the power of Ellis Island and the pain of it. And yet, for the vast majority, the gate opened. Most immigrants passed inspection and began their lives in America after only a few hours. They left Ellis Island carrying papers, baggage, children, and names that would soon be spoken in new neighborhoods: schools, factories, churches, synagogues, shops, farms, and boarding houses. They moved toward Manhattan, New Jersey rail terminals, and distant cities whose names they might barely pronounce. One island became a beginning point for millions of American family stories. Think of what that meant in human terms. A father hoping to earn enough to bring the rest of his family. A mother holding a child who had been sick during the crossing. A teenager hearing English all around him and realizing his old life was gone. A grandmother carrying a religious object wrapped in cloth. A young worker with a trade, a name, and no guarantee. They were not statistics when they arrived. They were tired human beings standing at the edge of a country that could become home. Over the decades, the people who passed through Ellis Island helped build modern America. They worked in mines, mills, garment factories, rail yards, restaurants, shops, farms, and city streets. Their children entered public schools. Their languages filled neighborhoods. Their food changed American tables. Their labor built wealth that did not always reward them fairly. Their faiths and customs sometimes met suspicion. But they stayed, adapted, argued, prayed, learned, married, voted, served, and became part of the country that had once inspected them. Here is the central contradiction of Ellis Island. It stood near the Statue of Liberty, one of the world's most powerful symbols of freedom. But Ellis Island was not freedom itself. It was inspection. It was judgment. It was a gate with rules. America called to the tired and poor, but America also measured them, questioned them, and sometimes rejected them. That does not make Ellis Island false. It makes it honest. Nations are not only what they promise, they are also what they do when strangers arrive asking to be included. As the 20th century began, the welcome became more complicated. Some Americans feared the arrival of people from different countries, religions, languages, and cultures. Politicians and nativist movements demanded restrictions. Laws changed. Categories hardened. In 1907, Ellis Island processed more than 1 million immigrants. But in the years that followed, the national mood shifted. By the 1920s, quota laws and new policies changed the meaning of the island. It became less a front door and more a place for difficult cases. For the people who were detained, Ellis Island could feel very different from hope. Some waited because of illness. Some waited because of paperwork. Some waited because inspectors doubted them. Families could be separated by doors, railings, medical rooms, and decisions no child could understand. The island's hospital treated many people and saved many lives, but treatment also meant delay, fear, and uncertainty. The Island of Tears was not a metaphor for those who watched a loved one held back while others moved on. War changed Ellis Island again. During the First World War and the Second World War, parts of the island served military purposes. Later, during the Second World War, German, Italian, and Japanese nationals suspected of being enemy aliens could be brought there. The same place that had welcomed millions also became a place of detention. This is not a separate story from American freedom. It is part of it. Freedom has always been tested most sharply when fear enters the room. After 1924, the great age of mass processing at Ellis Island was largely over. More immigration work moved overseas through consulates. The island remained active, but its purpose narrowed. It dealt with people whose paperwork raised questions, people suspected of illness, displaced persons, refugees, detainees, and cases that did not fit easily through the new system. The Great Hall, once filled with the sound of mass arrival, became quieter. America's gate had not vanished. It had moved, tightened, and changed shape. In 1954, Ellis Island officially closed. The last detainee left, and the island that had processed more than 12 million immigrants entered a new kind of silence. Buildings aged, paint peeled, windows broke, hospital wards emptied, the footsteps of families, inspectors, doctors, interpreters, guards, nurses, and children became echoes. For a time, Ellis Island looked less like a national shrine and more like a forgotten question in the harbor. What should America do at the place where it had once decided who belonged? Eventually, the island was remembered again. The main building was restored and reopened as a museum of immigration. Visitors returned not to be inspected, but to understand. They walked through the baggage room. They stood in the registry room. They read names, listened to voices, studied photographs, and searched for family records. For many Americans, Ellis Island became personal. It was no longer just a place in history. It was the first American room their ancestors had entered. That is why Ellis Island still matters. It does not offer a simple story. It does not say America was always open, and it does not say America was only cruel. It says something more human and more difficult. America was a promise with a checkpoint, a dream with paperwork, a harbor with a hospital, a torch beside an inspection hall, a nation that needed immigrants, feared immigrants, welcomed immigrants, and argued endlessly about immigrants. Ellis Island is the place where those contradictions became architecture. For viewers in America, Canada, Britain, Australia, and beyond, the story feels familiar because it is not only American. It is the story of departure and arrival, of leaving one shore and hoping another will receive you. Every immigrant family carries two maps, the place they came from and the place they tried to reach. Ellis Island reminds us that civilization is not measured only by monuments, armies, or wealth. It is measured by how a society treats people standing at its door. In the end, Ellis Island is not just an island. It is a threshold. It is the space between fear and hope, between exclusion and belonging, between the country America said it wanted to be and the country it struggled to become. Millions passed through and carried America forward in accents, recipes, prayers, songs, labor, courage, and memory. The gate did not always open. But when it did, it changed not only the lives of those who entered, it changed America itself. So when we look at Ellis Island today, we should not see only old brick buildings and a harbor. We should see a door. We should hear footsteps on stairs. We should imagine the silence before a decision, the breath before a name was called, the relief when a family was allowed forward. Ellis Island reminds us that freedom is not only a statue in the distance. Sometimes freedom is a gate opening after a long journey, and sometimes the story of a nation begins with a stranger stepping inside.